All right, let's bring in our market panel to react to all of that. My Lord, that was a cornucopia of news. Gary B. Smith, Cadena Group President Scott Martin from Kingsview Asset Management. They are both Fox News contributors. Scott, I don't know. I mean, if you had to pick something out of there was so much G20 oil. I think the Facebook thing is kind of big. I mean, it really is a snapshot in time showing you that they've become a target. I mean, they used to be, it was all happiness and, kind of sanctimony, and now they're
friends, likes.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Zuckerberg has kind of been a bad boy, hasn't he, Melissa? And his charm, let's say, is wearing off, I think, a bit on investors. Maybe not so much, I guess, investors, but on folks that would send nasty things in the mail, certainly. But also, I think, Melissa, on the government, too, because the government now has said, look, we need to regulate, maybe even break up some of these tech companies. But I do side with Zuckerberg on one thing that he talked about last week, which was these folks, Facebook has a ton of data in its hands, and there's more and more posts and new profiles created at Facebook than any time in history. So they have a lot of work ahead of them, and it's not just an easy task to go in and blame the company itself for all the problems they're having.
Gary, I mean, the other hit on Facebook in my mind is that they may have a lot of data, but so does everybody else. I mean, if you've checked in with data scientists lately, they're all tracking us and everything that we're doing. I think the information that Facebook has, this is what I'm hearing, is less precious than we are all really led to believe. Data's kind of everywhere now.
Yeah, totally agree. And, the one aspect of Facebook that maybe I'm a Luddite in some regards that I don't get is you don't have to use Facebook. I mean, you can make an argument you don't need to use, Google or anything else, but I can't imagine life without Google or Waze or all the things. I use Gmail, but Facebook, I use it less and less, and I'm sure probably
I deleted my
everyone
profile.
on this panel, almost everyone,
no difference. Yeah, I've had no difference.
Could stop using it and never miss it.
Yeah, seriously. All right, guys, don't move. Connell?
Let's shift back to China trade for a moment. Post G20, the former U.S. ambassador to China joins us now, former Secretary of Commerce as well, Gary Locke. Ambassador Locke, good to see you again. And, we had the
good to be with you.
Report coming out of Japan, and there's a couple ways to look at it. If your glass half full, you say, well, they restarted the talks. I suppose that's what we kind of expected. But now the question is, what are the next steps? We're not necessarily any closer, are we, to a deal? What's the next step?
No, there are a lot of tough issues still separating the two countries. At least there will not be an escalation of trade tensions, because we know that tariffs are actually hurting American consumers and Chinese consumers and businesses on both sides. The Fed alone, the U.S. Fed, has said that the tariffs already in place will cost the average household in America some $800 a year. So we certainly don't want an escalation, but it's going to be a long ways to go before we actually reach any type of agreement. Let's not forget that within the last year and a half, Secretary Ross and Secretary Mnuchin publicly announced to great fanfare an agreement with China, only to have the White House say, no, that's not good enough. And then most recently in May, we thought we had an agreement with China, and the Chinese felt it was not satisfactory. So there are long ways to go. Long ways to go.
Fair enough. I'm curious to your view on this Huawei situation. There's been a lot of debate today back and forth. What is Huawei now that some U.S. companies are allowed to do business with it again, and that certainly helped chip makers today in the stock market? Is there a needle the president can thread here where, companies in the U.S. can still do business with this Chinese company, but Huawei itself won't be able to import its equipment into the United States? Or do you have to choose national security threat or negotiating, chip? Which is it?
Well, in some ways, the White House has created kind of a dilemma and an inconsistency and a contradiction. We're trying to tell our allies not to buy Huawei equipment, and yet we're allowing U.S. companies to sell products and components to Huawei that might be used for those high-tech products, whether it's 5G or broadband. And but yet we're not allowed in the United States to purchase that equipment, and we don't want our allies to purchase it.
Do you think we should make a choice?
But actually, But I think the White House made a mistake in trying to portray all of Huawei as a national security threat, because Huawei also makes very cheap cell phones. And I think what will be allowed would be U.S. companies to sell components, whether it's the glass for the cell phone or some chips that might be used in those cheap cell phones that would not impact our national security. So the president has to, and the White House has to figure out how they kind of pull back some of their comments about Huawei. Yes, the intelligence agencies have deep concerns about the security threat posed by Huawei and its equipment on 5G and our cellular network, but not everything that Huawei makes is a threat.
Right. Okay. So separate parts of the business. All right. We'll see how it all plays out. Ambassador Locke, good to see you once again. Melissa.
Taking on Silicon Valley, President Trump slamming big tech bias in an interview with Fox News. Listen.
Google, by some measures, the most powerful company in the world. All information flows through it. They're against you. They don't want you reelected. Can you get reelected if Google's against you?
So, I've been hearing that about Google and Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah, that's right.
I won. They were totally against me. I won. Hillary Clinton,
they didn't think you were going to win.
Well, they fought me very hard. I mean, I heard that, and they're fighting me hard right now.
Interesting. Scott, they're certainly more against him now than they were before. So if they're going to try to bring tech against him, I mean, what do you think?
I mean, those comments that he just made could be awfully motivating, can't they? I mean, so if they, try again. If you don't succeed, it seems to be the challenge that Trump is throwing out there. Listen, Melissa, obviously the bias is very spread amongst Silicon Valley and whatever side it is on. I mean, it's definitely more left-leaning than right. I think it's just a sad state of affairs to have such great companies in the United States like these have any bias, whether it's conservative or liberal these days, and have workers that are afraid to express themselves however they may lean. So to me, it's something they need to clean up corporately inside their culture, but something that it doesn't seem like a lot of them are willing to do other than saying, yeah, we're guilty, but we're not going to do anything about it.
Gary, it's so interesting. In the old days, you just had the big three networks and the big newspapers, and maybe people didn't realize how left-leaning they were because there wasn't as much free information. Now there's tons of free information, online sites, and this sort of thing, but they have the algorithms to sort of keep them biased to the left. How have things changed, good or bad?
Well, I don't think they've changed much at all. As you point out, Melissa, any outlet, whether it's Google or whether it's New York Times that has editorial content or editorial input is going to have a bias one way or another. And it's been that way whether you look at the New York Post or the Times or CBS News, even all the way back to the Walter Cronkite era. So I think it's just I think it's just a matter of fact now.
There you go.
Reader
Gary and
beware.
Scott, thank you.
All right.